when you talk about compassionate communication, people look at you as naive, idealistic, or kind of out of touch of the real world of these days. There is a strong association with being weak and overly emotional, able to make tough decisions or too focused on feelings over results. Well, and it goes in even to the side of saying some might even see you as manipulative or a sign of insecurity rather than having genuine empathy. This perception stems from the common misconception that compassion is equivalent to weakness and that business requires a ruthless dog-eat-dog mentality. Is that correct? But there is some research, and I was looking around in preparation of this episode. There is some research that shows that 76% of people who experience empathy from their leaders reported that they were engaged, compared only with 32% when they were experiencing less empathy. There is some studies showing a strong correlation between employee feeling heard and understood and the levels of engagement and job satisfaction. So there is some real data that can inform us a little bit more about compassionate communication. And today, my guest is an expert on compassionate communication. Maria Arpa is a leading expert in the workplace dynamics and compassionate communication, and she's transforming the way organizations address conflict and build relationships. She's also the founder of the Center for Peaceful Solutions, and she has founded quite a lot of ventures about mediation. Maria, it's so lovely to have you with me and to have somebody really who understands the topic and to remove all these urban legends about compassionate communication. Welcome. And by the way, I wanted to ask you, so how was your journey? How did you end up working on that specific topic?
Well, that's a whole, that's a whole workshop in itself. But to cut a long story short, I grew up in, abject poverty in central London, immigrant parents, and I kind of always had this sense that something wasn't right. But, of course, when you're a child, that's your normal. So you don't know what the question is. And I always knew that how I was growing up was not for me. And I managed to, there are many ways out of the ghetto. And, sometimes boys join the army or, sport or the arts or academia. Many children of immigrant parents educate themselves out. They become doctors and accountants and one other way is entrepreneurship. And I managed to find that I had a sort of talent for building things. And so by the time I was 28, I was running an advertising agency. And I had many good years, but I also, during that time, had my children. I sort of grew up in my 30s. And then I found that look, it was all very small, but for me and where I came from, I suddenly had some power. And I found myself, as much as it was financially and materially, and to all intents and purposes, it looked successful, spiritually, it was a desert. Mm. And there was something about the questions I was able to ask myself, even though I didn't know what the answers were. I'm not even sure I knew what the questions were, but the levels of dissatisfaction that were going on in me at a soul level drove me to find something else. And it was just before I was in my 40s, just before I turned 40, I discovered community mediation. That's mediating neighbour disputes in social housing. And Reiki healing, which is, an energetic, which of course back then, I didn't like to talk about so much, but over the last 20 years, things have moved on and we can talk about this stuff now. And also Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. which is, you know, a base based on non-resistance, non-violence, compassion, and a sort of using language from the heart rather than from the head. So with those things literally landing on me in the same year, I kind of made this decision that, you know, I couldn't be getting a more powerful message that I had a path. And so I sold my advertising agency and I went through myself into this work and, you know, started from scratch and learned my trade and, you know, practiced and learned from, you know, stood on the shoulders of giants to learn this work, and found myself at the real sharp end working with gangs and you know, people who have got nothing to lose. And then I started to realize that actually, yes, you can work at the sharp end, but we're all in pain one way or another. And workplaces are a place where we have a lot of unnecessary human suffering.
Absolutely. And by the way, when you're telling your story, I totally feel you. I had a similar journey. But out of this similar journey, in fact, I have the impression that, yes, at the beginning it was because when you come from a background that didn't allow you to have everything that you wanted, then you start going into the extreme of focusing on the financial perks. So I stayed in a company that maybe I didn't appreciate or appreciated less and less when I was towards the 40s. Because, and I was staying because of these financial benefits that I was getting. But suddenly, as you say, at the 40s, there is something that you start asking yourself questions that are related also to your upbringing, from where you come from, and are you doing enough to do? Are you doing what your life? Are you living your life with a feeling of purpose? And yeah, I totally feel you on that side. I wanted to ask you to jump straight to the topic. So I was telling at the beginning that there is a lot of misunderstanding about this compassionate communication. And indeed, it doesn't even matter what if you had education or not. Everybody has its own definition and understanding of compassionate communication, because I have been discussing with people without no education and with these famous white collars who are in leadership positions in corporate, and they have similar perspective, like they see it as something that is weak. And what I wanted to understand is, how does compassionate communication differ from the traditional approaches to conflict resolution?
Thank you. Yes, well, that's a really nice question because, well, at its very basic level, if I'm thinking about conflict resolution, then often the kinds of methodologies that we use are responsive and reactive. So we wait for the argument to arise, we wait for the conflict to come up, and then we mediate or we facilitate or we take legal steps, or, you know, whatever it is we're going to do to put the fire out. And for me, compassionate communication has a more 360-degree sense of humans in trying to achieve a goal, or trying to find meaning and purpose, or trying to get from A to B, making progress together, and designing out unnecessary human suffering, designing out the need for us to fight each other, designing out adversarial positions. So actually, for me, the difference is that in compassionate communication, we understand and we operate from our core humanity. And by doing that, by starting with our core humanity, by changing the way that we instruct each other, that we learn about each other, we actually get more done with less resources.
You know what is funny? I understand the concept when you say that compassionate communication is related to to align ourselves with our core humanity. But sometimes I wonder, isn't our core humanity to be aggressive, mean, greedy? So I want this and I don't see the other person as a human being, so I deserve it more than the other. And that's, sorry, I don't want to go spill outside of the workplace, but we see it in wars that are ongoing today, that we dehumanize completely the other. So we don't care. So we only care about this number of people dying from my side. So the others are really bloody animals. And that's how the conflict is expanding, and that there is a lot of polarization of opinions. And in the workplace, also that happens. We dehumanize the person who is working more than 10 hours per day. We just push stuff. We don't treat them with respect, because we have the need to succeed. But it's me first. It's my promotion that counts, not the other person. I will use that person in whatever means possible that are legally possible in the workplace. We just do it more in a more polished way, right? So being human at the end, is it being an ape, or is it, as you say, having a lot of empathy?
So I think there's a place somewhere in the middle of that, because for me, being human is understanding that we're not islands. I actually cannot operate on the planet on my own, right? So I talk about this. I mean, I'm jumping somewhere else, but I think it's really relevant to what we're talking about. So we focus, and we have been programmed and indoctrinated through the Industrial Revolution and before that, and through our mainstream education systems, in an individual agenda. And the idea is that it's a dog eat dog world, and that competition is everything. But let me tell you something about competition. So whether that's competing to win the trophy, or whether that's competing to make more money or stretching ourselves, competition cannot take place without there being a whole lot of collaboration. So in order for two football teams to play that match, there had to be a football association. There had to be two teams practicing with each other. There had to be an agreement about where we were showing up to play on what day and what the rules are. The amount of collaboration for 45 minutes each way. And we focus on the competition, and we program people to believe that that's what's important. But actually, the collaboration that's going on day in day, even if I hold you as an adversary, right? And somehow I'm relying on you to switch the lights on. You know, you may be the janitor and I might hate you, but if you don't empty the trash can and switch the light on, we can't function. So for me, there's some poor thinking around the importance of competition when you take it out of the context of the amount of human collaboration that must go on for any competition to take place, unless we are violent enemies and I'm going to take you by surprise and murder you.
Maria, I have got several discussions with people, senior people, around the concept of competition. The majority still believes that competition is healthy in order to pick the best of the best, and these people are going to be leading a corporation. And you made me think when you were talking about an experiment that was done by a famous university, and I don't want to claim, I forgot the name of that university. It's called the Marshmallow Spaghetti Tower. So they they brought some Harvard, maybe it was Harvard, by the way, because now I'm thinking about Harvard graduates who were doing their MBA, and they were saying, so there is going to be a competition. Whoever makes the biggest tower just with marshmallow and spaghettis. And then the same experiment was conducted with I think it was teachers for kindergarten. And actually, when it was repeated several times, the teachers of kindergarten were always making the highest tower. And there is a study behind it because there was some research showing that the fact that these Harvard graduates were looking at each other as competitors, it was preventing communication.
Yes.
While the teachers were thinking about in a very empathetic way, yeah, we have to do it like that. They were not thinking about speed. They were thinking about how to achieve this together without looking on the shoulders if somebody was going to stab them in the back or if they were going to shine or not. There was a mission, and that mission was to make the biggest tower. It was not about who is the best, who had the best idea, who is going to be leading the team, because nobody briefed them on that. But naturally, because, and you have mentioned it, because of the context, the society has shaped us that competition is good, we lose the sight that collaborative work is something that make us win, in fact. And that we see it quite a lot in certain teams in football, for instance. I don't want to talk about England anymore in football, but let's forget that. Let's park that conversation. But in football, in certain armies where they were not the best, but they were taught together, built. They were built together so that they could win wars, they could win matches, and that works also in the corporate world. And so the key point is that there is research to show that collaborative environments work better than cutthroat competition. But unfortunately, this message doesn't arrive to every single leader in the world.
Well, it doesn't arrive because you see, we also then have to start looking at, the people that build the businesses, the leaders, the owners of businesses, the funders of businesses, the people that hold the power and the purse strings. What are their motivations? Because you see, at the beginning we talked about, the race for money. But you see, the way I've understood that now, I'm 64 now, and so I've lived a little, and I've done this work a little, and what I've seen is that you see, money is a financial proxy that we can use to defend ourselves from our emotions. So we can, instead of going inwards to find abundance and love and generosity for ourselves, before we have to have compassion for ourselves before we can have it for anyone else, right? What we can do is buy ourselves loads of cushions. Mm-hmm. You can use the material benefits to just buy more and more and more cushions to keep everyone away from our vulnerability, from our ability to connect. And therefore, and the more we do that, we lose the sense of trust and vulnerability and working together. So it's a constant battle to keep away the things that are going to make us tender. And of course we can do that. Of course we can do that. But if you do that, then you have to expect you're going to end up paying more taxes because there's going to be more people by the wayside. Everything is interconnected. That you can't get away from it. The idea of division and separation is a myth. Until you can defy gravity, my feet and your feet are on this planet. It's one organism. Whatever you do will affect me.
That's
and
true.
So that's what compassion is for me. It's understanding that in having compassion for you, I have compassion for myself.
I have the impression, and you have already been given a little bit of a hint of what it takes to learn compassionate communication, but it's not easy because you are telling me I need to lose my fear, I need to trust people that I don't know. I have the impression that to learn compassionate communication, the standard or traditional way of learning doesn't work. You cannot go and say, let's have a 2 days training. I have my 80 slides for the 2 days, and let's see definitions, have a little bit of discussion, and enough. Because there is a lot of introspection. First of all, I need to know myself. I need to know what I'm feeling. I need to be able then to open up a little bit, like show myself in a vulnerable way, and that's not easy. It's not because the facilitator is going to tell me do it that I'm going to do it. Maybe I'm going to bullshit, but I will not really do it. So how do you see this approach for learning compassionate communication? Is it like completely different, the way you learn that versus learning another skill like communication skills, like presenting PowerPoints and stuff like that? Is it different?
So I think I can answer that in several ways. Firstly, obviously I want to go into commercial organizations or, communities and deliver something, and you can't walk in and say, look, we're going on a 2-year journey and you might see some results at the end of 2 years. So one of the things that we can do very quickly is change our language, our use of language, because often the language that we use with each other unwittingly, because it's the only way we've been taught, is we're using a debate model of conversation. And in debate, the purpose of a debate is to win the argument. So it's two people talking at each other, hoping for one to persuade the other into their way. And, we see this in movies. If you write a script, if you want to write a Hollywood blockbuster, you're told to leave a conflict in every scene. We see this in academia, in our judicial processes, in the military, all over. We were only ever presented with debate as the model of conversation. And the research that I did and what I learned was that actually that's fantastic if I'm in the science laboratory or we're arguing over some abstract. But once human emotions are involved, using debate is disastrous. So, yes. and even worse in workplaces, because at least if we're in a family, we can have a good old argument about it. But at work, I'm most likely going to zip it. And then the resentments and the hostility and, what we call now quiet quitting, and people not making their full contribution because of all the resentments. And no one's coming to tell you. They're not going to say, I feel really resentful today, so I'm not going to do my work. So we lose in the contribution. We lose in our way of being together that makes life meaningful and productive and creative. So when I talk about this, there's a core here of how do we understand each other? Because for me, when I learn compassionate communication, of course, that's a journey I chose to go on. I said, I love this. I'm going to go on this journey and I want to heal those wounds, because we're all wounded. We are all wounded. It's just the degree to which we can admit it. Now, some people, that's not for them. So we're just going to have to adapt language. But what I've shown is in a 2-hour workshop, if people suddenly change certain things that they might say to be more of an inquiring mind, more curious than instructive, they get a different result. And then they want more because I'm getting a different result from people. So there are little ways in which we can build. Just even changing the way we use language from a debate model to a dialogue model. And when I started doing this work and I realized this was the shift, I could not find an instruction manual on how to have a dialogue. And so that's the work I've been doing, how to have a dialogue. And there are lots of things about that. It comes from the heart, not the head. So if you're speaking, I'm listening, your words energetically are coming through my heart into my understanding. And to do that, I need to use language differently, because if you're talking and I'm hearing in the heart, I need to hear what the needs are. What is it you really want me to hear? What's important? What's at stake for you? Not, is this person an idiot? Are they clever? Are they intelligent? Should I waste my time here or not? Which is what happens if I'm listening to your words through my head.
What I love about this approach is that, and it works for many things in life, is that you're starting for an essential milestone that is going to create a habit, like a neural pathway inside of your brain, so that it becomes a habit. But behind this habit, there is a lot of science, in fact. If I remember correctly, is by paying attention to your language, you are toning down the part of your brain which has all this emotional and animalistic feeling, how we feel hurt when our wives or husband is going to tell us something nasty. And so we await the part that is more rational just for a little bit, so that we have control of what is happening. So, and if we practice that in a repetition, then it becomes like a natural thing that comes, oh, that's, if I use that language, it's going to have that consequence. We don't even think we don't have the thought process, but we just have the trigger that is put in the red light in order to control our language and to have meaningful interactions with others. So creation of habits, it is an investment. As you say, it might be that it takes 2-3 hours to practice just these parts. But if the practice is done afterwards in a regular basis, then it becomes like a superpower that you have got, and that can build on making conversations that are more empathetic, where we can feel the other, because we are removing from our brain this emotional control that when we are in autopilot, we let go just all our bloody emotions.
So I love that. And for me, you know, when people see me in action, you know, look, I've been doing this a long time. I'm not going to be modest about it. People see me in action, they go, wow, this is amazing. You know, your command of language and your ability to work and to really connect. And there's two things I want to say about that. The first is that it's like, what I say to people is, well, 30 years ago, had I decided that I wanted to play the piano, you'd be watching me play, you know, the amount of hours I've put into this, you know, the practice, the delving, the learning, the research, the putting it out there, reviewing, you know, you'd be watching me play concertos in, you know, Sydney Opera House or whatever. You know, that's the level of study I've given this. Now, of course, not everybody's going to want to do that. So for some people, it's about, how can you get the best out of the situations you find yourself in? But I really want to be, I mean, you've probably already got from me that I'm not your regular kind of tree hugging, you know, let's all get on our hippie barge. You know, that doesn't work for me at all. The purpose of compassionate communication. Sorry, there's a siren going. I don't know if you can hear it, but the purpose of compassionate communication is to build the trust, understanding, and respect that we can get to shorthand. And I can say to you, for fuck's sake, Ivan, do I have to explain myself 1,000 times? And you wouldn't take offense, because we love each other. You know me and I know you. The whole point is we go through this place because we've been so invested in the debate. We've been so invested in making adversaries of each other that if you don't agree with me, somehow you're an enemy. That we're getting past that into our common humanity so that we can get to shorthand, so that we can hold boundaries together, so that I don't have to dance around you and you don't have to dance around me. That's the point. So when my husband rings me and I'm in the middle of something and I go, not now, he doesn't get upset because we've done that work. Our foundations are solid. We know who we are.
Absolutely.
That's the point. That's the point. And to me, the compassion, it's the communication is not about compassionate communication. That's just a path to get to a place of trust where we have worked out who we are, what we want to do, and we have designed in processes for what we're going to do when we're stuck.
I was thinking, like, in the corporate world, and I was thinking specifically about certain discussions with commercial teams. And I remember that they were saying, yeah, if we convince the retailer about that, it's not going to be easy because the only thing that they want is money. And then when you see the realities, yes, they want money and they have a pattern of negotiation, which is whatever you say, 50% less. But then we did an experiment where the discussion was between somebody who was a friend of the retailer. And there was this level of trust. There was no pattern, no process of going into the middle. It was, okay, tell me. Okay, go do it quick. But at the end, there was a willingness to listen to the other so that you could find a way to keep on being friends. So trust is one of the most important inputs in order to derive profits, in order to derive growth in a market or for a corporation. So, and trust, unfortunately, hasn't been that popular for a while. I remember in the 80s, it wasn't that usual to develop trust relationship in business, in the business side, and it has something to do with our chemistry. There is exactly an identified molecule, oxytocin, as a base of trust, and there is a guy called Paul Zak who has been measuring these levels of this oxytocin across not only Europeans but in different parts of the world to see what are the triggers of this trust, what type of actions if you do, you can, the levels of oxytocin increase equal, there is a good level of trust. So it's not magic, it's not something that comes from our good way of behaving, it is the chemistry of human beings.
Yes, completely. And that's for me when I talk about our common humanity and finding our humanity, true intelligence is not here. Intelligence is a trinity of the gut. We don't talk about our gut reactions.
Mm-hmm.
It's the gut, the heart, and the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an alignment. And when you believe that intelligence just comes from the mind and logical and rational thinking, and you try to factor out the emotional content, the intuitive content, the instinctive content, you're actually completely off track. Someone somewhere will pay for that.
And that is true. Tell me, what would be the tips that you would give, some strategies to in order to develop a culture? So we are talking about the scale of the organization, to develop a culture of compassionate communication. So let's think first about an organization. Then we are going to discuss about the individual, but what can organizations do to develop this compassionate communication as part of their culture?
So in my ideal world, is what happens is a company would measure how much they're spending on disciplinary and grievance procedures, which we have in the UK. They would measure how much dissatisfaction there is. They would look at the petty arguments. They would try to quantify that and look at all the reactive processes they put in to try and sort of stop anyone putting a spanner in the works, because look, if you run an organization, you're never going to let one person or a small group of people put a spanner in the works, grind it to a halt. You're not going to allow that. But you would look at the cost of that. And there have been studies on the cost of workplace conflict. And then you would say, okay, so we need to do something more proactive. And one of the things I talk about is if you put lots of people in the space together, tensions will arise. If you put people in the space together with deadlines and limits on resources, which is always the way, there are always limits on resources, then there are always going to be tensions. Even if everybody is on message and on purpose, there'll be different ways that they want to achieve the same thing. Right. So in my world, what we do is we create specifically designed spaces to have those conversations, just like there's a space to go to the bathroom, just like there's a space to make a cup of coffee and to get a glass of water. It's a specific space. You have specific spaces for dialogue. And that way you change the culture, because you teach people that you don't have to wait until you're so pissed off that you have to leave or take an action or punish somebody, that there are ways in which we can start to be more sensitive to the changes in energy and atmosphere and deal with them at that level.
Maria, I was wondering, maybe it's a good question to ask now. So from one side, when you read all these books about healthy cultures, non-toxic cultures, they tell you, so there needs to be a little bit of trust, but there needs to be a little bit of candid communication.
Absolutely.
Candid communication, do you see it as the opposite of compassionate communication?
So that's really interesting, because for me, the most compassionate thing I can do is tell you clearly, without any kind of threat or punishment, is to treat you like an adult and explain to you what the limits and the boundaries are in this situation. But not telling you it as if I'm some kind of detective or investigator or self-made police officer within the workplace. It's literally being able to sit down and say, when you took this job and we talked about these expectations, and now it seems that, you've come in late every single day for the last week. You came in at 9:15, 9:30. What conversation do you think we could be having right now? Because I'm curious, because if it turned out that employee had some serious thing going on at home and was sleeping in their car because they've left their partner or they've been thrown out, I want to help. So to ask a person, what conversation do you think as grown-ups we could be having right now, tells me everything I need to know about whether I further want to invest in that person or whether I don't want to invest in that person. Does that make sense? Because, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how perfect our systems are, shit happens.
You brought a memory in my head. Back in my early days in corporate, one of the best managers that I had in the corporate world, he was somebody who had this ability that, despite the fact that he was tough, direct, when there was a mistake, I was the first one to know it if that mistake came from me. but at the same time, you had the feeling that he cared about you, that he wasn't doing it to punish you, he was doing it because he really gives a shit about you. That's that you could feel it in the tone of voice. His voice was really like very masculine, a big Greek. Thank you, Michalis. I learned a lot from him, by the way. Now, I have the impression that people tries to be a little bit more empathetic, more compassionate, but we do mistakes, especially if we do that alone, right? What are the common mistakes that that you have observed when people are trying to communicate compassionately? What are the common mistakes?
So for me, there's two sides. The first side is believing that you can communicate compassionately when you already have the outcome in mind. So that's just manipulation. It's just being nice to manipulate to get an outcome, believing that you can take a sort of patriarchal kind of, single-minded purpose. So that's one mistake, compassionate communication. If you do that, you are going to come across as so lacking in any kind of genuineness. And, to communicate compassionately, we have to be authentic and genuine. That's and then at the other end of the scale was the things that we started this conversation with about believing that, giving people too much slack, being conflict avoidant, being too nice, giving people too many chances, and not holding responsibility and accountability at the center of the way I'm communicating with compassion. Because what I'm saying is these are the needs of the job. This is what you signed up for. These are the needs of the job. This is my role in upholding those standards or those responsibilities. This is how the system is going to kick my ass if we don't do it. And so, I want to compassionately understand, how do we get you from here to here? Is there something that's deficient? Is it a training issue? Have you got stuff going on that means you just can't be present to what's needed? Or have you checked out of the job? You see, I want you to tell me, because what we keep doing in workplaces is repeating the model of school where the adults who were supposed to be teachers, the leaders, also had the power of enforcement and created power imbalances, unfair power imbalances. And what I'm saying is, actually, when we go into a workplace, we are all adults together. I have to treat you like an adult. Doesn't matter what our age difference is. You come into the workplace as an adult, unless you're a teenager on work experience, but you're an adult, and I'm treating you as an adult because I'm not your mum, I'm not your dad, I'm not here to do anything other than respect you as an adult and see whether what you bring and what I bring fits. And that doesn't require any kind of charge behind it.
Maria, I just need some clarification. So you mentioned that it's not positive to have an outcome in mind when you want to have communication, compassionate communication. But then I was thinking, if that outcome is good for you and for me, that's fine. Maybe it's only if it is very selfish, the outcome is only for me. I want to get my 60% margin and screw the retailer or whatever it is, the other person in front of me. Can you clarify that part?
Yes, what I'm talking about is transparency. If I have an outcome in mind and I'm willing to risk everything to make that outcome, including my relationship with you, then I need to be upfront. That's the compassionate thing to do, is to say, Ivan, I've got this single-minded goal or this outcome, or I'm really worried that we won't hit that target. And I really would like to enlist your help, and I'd love to find a way for us to do this together, or to get you what the resources you need to be able to cooperate. But if you can't, it's a very different conversation.
I wonder if it makes sense to clarify the word compassion. Everybody has a different definition, but that's not good. Let's be a little bit authoritarian. So the way I perceive compassion is using feelings, understanding of emotions in a channeled way, like in a controlled manner, not like. How would you define compassion or in your case?
So compassion for me is a way of being in the world that allows us our humanity, that allows me to be a thinking, feeling, acting human being, and understands that you have that and I have that. So compassion for me is based on something called needs-based theory. And needs-based, I mean, you've probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. There are lots of iterations. There was a Chilean economist called Manfred Max Neef who worked with needs. And needs are an understanding that you need respect and I need respect. You need economic sustainability, I need economic sustainability. So what are the needs? And when I recognize the needs that you have, I have them too, because they're universal. So a really good way of describing this is think about the need for oxygen, okay? The need for air. How do we meet that need for oxygen? What's the physical thing we do to meet our need for oxygen? Breathe. Okay, we breathe, and you breathe and I breathe, and that's a strategy. So the strategy we use is to breathe. And how many arguments do we have over breathing?
Oh, that's a good question.
I don't know that we have any arguments over breathing, because there isn't another strategy. But now let's take a big word like respect. You need respect and I need respect. How many different strategies are there for meeting a need for respect? And how many arguments do we have over it? Countless. Because even at a cultural level, in some cultures, to make eye contact with an elder is disrespectful, and in other cultures to not make eye contact with an elder is disrespectful. So even then, the use of language, how I perceive certain words and you perceive, we could be having a whole fight over that. So the only argument we can ever have is over the strategies we're using, because needs are universal. Now we get into money, and you've brought up money several times. Money is a strategy, not a need. So now we have to understand, some people who are not so well paid may be coming to work to meet their need for money so they can buy food and pay their rent. There are other people who are coming to work to get money to meet their need for creativity and adventure and excitement, where other people, that money wouldn't stretch that far. So now we have to look at these power imbalances and the motivations of what brings you to work and what brings me to work, and they may be very different. This is compassion.
I get it now, especially the sense that you give to this word humanity. Humanity, not in the sense I'm a human, we are humans. So we can be start understanding that the needs that Maria may have might be similar to my needs. So to think in that way as humanity, as a Gaia, as a connection, Oh, I hate, now I'm talking like a guru, self-development guru. No, no, I forget that. But it is about connection with people. That is for sure. Maria, do you have any heroes, any companies or leaders who are really successful at implementing this compassionate communication practice?
So yeah, there's lot. I mean, one of my greatest teachers was Marshall Rosenberg, and with non-violent communication. I was very fortunate that I learned directly from Marshall. I had, he was my teacher. And so I really understood the values that he was trying to bring into the world about communicating compassionately, but also social change, social action, non-resistance, all of these kinds of things. But there are other people. One person who's an educator is Alfie Kohn, Kohn. Alfie Kohn is an amazing educator around parenting and education. But then as I go out into the world, I've met, I've worked in prisons and I work in businesses, and I've met some outstanding people in the prison system whose only desire is rehabilitation within a system that doesn't have the resources to do rehabilitation, really.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a restaurant, a small restaurant chain and chef in London, and they are the epitome of this work. Their care for their team and their staff, their willingness to understand people and bring people together to form teams that trust each other. Look, it doesn't always work. I mean, you're always battling against employment law and all the rest of it, but the intention is honourable. The CEO recently said, Maria, you are the greatest gift we can give to our staff. And I mean, of course, that's lovely, and my ego gets stroked and all the rest of it. But the meaning is that this is something we want our people to have, not just at work, but in their lives. I work with an international management consultancy, very, they hire graduates, they bring the graduates up through, different stages, and they're really interested, so much so that I think it's 4 or 5 members of their team have been on my 1-year training. I do a 1-year practitioner training so that you can, because what I don't want to do, I don't want to be the person that comes into the business and does this and dispenses anything. I can't dispense anything, but what I can do is share the skills, is share this. And in an organization, you can have key people that you can rely on, that people can go to. There's a world famous boarding school that have invested in this, and I think they've sent 6 people on my 1-year training over the years, and they have their head of well-being who does this for their students. It changes the nature of how people can trust each other within an organization.
I want to correct you with one word that you mentioned. You were describing a real situation. So you said, Maria, that the CEO of this restaurant was telling you you are the best gift that I could give to my organization. But I wouldn't see it as a gift. I would see it as an investment. Because everybody knows that in the restaurant business, when people do not want to work, they can break your business. So there is a high turnover, people go living on sick leaves, people not doing their job correctly. And that, in terms of productivity, in a tight business with low margin, despite what they say about expensive restaurants, these expensive restaurants cost a lot to make them expensive. So it is an investment that people does into creating cultures, healthy cultures where people can communicate, trust each other. They have this sense of accountability that if I drop because I don't feel like working today, I'm letting down my team. It's not about me, or it's not about the boss, or it's not about the salary. You will still get paid, but I don't want to let down my team. And that little thing about accountability with the rest of the team is incredibly powerful in order to create great teams. And yes, Maria, you are doing an awesome job of focusing just in that part that makes big changes in terms of culture in, at work. Tell me, how do people can reach you out if they have questions about your approach, your methodology, how they can help you? You can help them to develop these amazing cultures.
Well, thank you. So, I love to get some feedback and I love to hear from people. But my name happens to be reasonably unusual, Maria Arpa, ARPA. And if you literally Google me, you'll find me. That's the quickest way. Just Google Maria Arpa and you'll find me, and you can email me and you can reach me. And I love to share this work. It's kind of my vocation, if you like.
So I know that when people Google you, then they can find your website, but I also will put your website and LinkedIn. That's fine if, in fact, that's how we met.
Yeah.
But anyways, that would be amazing. So I'm going to put the links for your LinkedIn profile and your website. Maria, it was really nice to speak to you.
Thank you. I loved it. I loved meeting you. You're wonderful. Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you very much.
This has been truly enriching. Thank you.
Enjoy the beautiful weather as usual in London.
Yes.
By the way, here is not that better. We 8 degrees and it looks like London right now.
Oh, right. Okay.
My place, in fact, I don't know if you're familiar with a small town called Bath in
Yeah, Bath. Yeah. I'm going there on Sunday, funnily enough.
Oh, by the way, my village looks a little bit, has this vibe of Bath.
Wow. How nice. Well, listen, if you ever find yourself in London, let me know.
I will definitely, Maria. Thank you for making the time for this wonderful episode of the Growth Hacking Culture podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.